Welcome to the Wellness in Every Season podcast, where we embark on a transformative journey towards achieving total wellness, even in the midst of overwhelming moments. I am your host, Autumn Carter, and I'm thrilled to have you here. This podcast is a sanctuary for all mothers out there, and we extend a warm invitation to anyone seeking guidance and inspiration. We believe in fostering an inclusive community where we learn and grow together, supporting each other during life's challenging transitions. Join us as we step out of survival mode and discover the path to thriving, embracing wellness in every season of motherhood. From sleepless nights to new beginnings, we'll explore practical strategies, share heartfelt stories, and uncover the transformative power of self-care and self-love. Together, we'll unlock the wisdom, strength, and resilience within ourselves, reminding one another that we're never alone on this beautiful yet demanding journey. It's time to prioritize your well-being and reclaim your joy, one season at a time. This is episode 15, and I have Camber with us today, and she is somebody who has been through trauma and overcome it, so I'm going to introduce her a little bit, and then we're going to dive in. Camber is someone who is passionate about truth. She loves learning and challenging belief systems and identifying where those beliefs were created from. Camber loves science and the outdoor world, whether it's hiking, enjoying nature walks in the forest or on the beach, or soaking up sunshine and water. She loves sports, games, and competition of all kinds. Happens when you grow up with brothers. Camber is a mother of 4, has experienced divorce, single motherhood, and is now enjoying the fruits of a new relationship and a new passion for building a business around her talents. Is there anything else that you want to tell us about you?
I think that's pretty good. I love that you added in the brothers because that's really where a lot of the competition did start.
The reason why I have Camber on here is because she has gone through trauma. How did you learn to trust yourself after everything that you went through with your divorce and raising your girls alone and having to help them overcome their trauma as well?
That's a fabulous question because it really correlates with overcoming trauma. I had to start believing in myself before I could even take the step of divorce. And even though I knew it was a bad situation to be in, I didn't trust myself enough to get out of it and to be okay on the other side of it. And so there was a long journey of learning how to start building that. And I have to say, I think it really began with some friendships in my life. Because before then, it was an experience where your environment is purely degrading. Like it doesn't build you up at all. You're told and treated like you're insignificant and that you are there to take care of other people. And that is your only purpose, that there's no part of you that actually matters or is important to people. And then, especially like in an abusive situation, the abuser likes to cut off any sources that would counteract that. And so it was definitely took a lot of restoring and building. So I had a friend that ended up the business at the time that I was in, my job at the time, I ended up being a worker in her home for one of her kids. So one of her kids was one of my clients. And we kind of got to know each other. And then when I stopped working there, we were able to become friends a lot more. So we got into some more intense conversations and just learning each other. She took a vested interest in who I was, and she found value in that. She very much valued my thoughts and my opinions and would ask questions, important questions like, well, what do you think about this? And if I am in this situation? And the fact that she presented value to me was very foreign, very foreign. And it took me a while to find my voice. Like I would try and express my thoughts and they wouldn't come out very clearly. I wasn't used to doing that. And she was so patient and she would repeat back. She's like, oh, do you mean something like this? And then I could clarify. I could hear what she was hearing from me and I could say, oh, no, not really, and try and add to it. Or I could be like, yes, it's like that, and expound. And it was kind of like a testing ground for me to start in a little playground of learning how to express myself to somebody that valued who I was. And again, that was such a foreign concept to me. But the more that I verbalized my own thoughts and the more that I saw somebody else valuing them, the more I realized that I did have value. And so that started this really neat journey. I ended up switching jobs around that time as well. And the new boss that I had, one of the co-owners, ended up really valuing my opinion as well. And so having a second, especially like in business, a second person to value my thoughts, it was incredible. And I think that started a path for me to be, of learning to trust myself, to realize that I am capable, that I have talents, that I know how to survive. And that it just blossomed from there. I was able to see how I could survive on my own.
How did you bring that into your daughters once you separated?
There's a long journey with that, and it's different from the older ones to the younger ones as well, because I don't think they saw me as strong. I think they saw me as a survivor and strong in a survival kind of way, but not in a way of being able to, like, I don't think they saw me as very capable. And so the one moment that sticks out is during the divorce, I ended up having, well, many breakdowns, but most of them were like done on my own and quietly. But I had a breakdown in front of my oldest, and I was really worried. I was like, so self-conscious. I'm sorry you have to see this. I wanted to be this pillar of strength and this perfect example. But she ended up thanking me for letting her see that. And it helped her realize that I was human, that I was going through these emotions. And it really ended up being a moment that brought value to her and comfort to her, seeing that I did have a range of emotions instead of hiding them all, and that I was strong because of all the grief that I was overcoming. So honestly, showing a side of vulnerability with my kids that I thought I had to hide so I could be, I could be a strong example, like this pillar of strength to them. But what they really needed was to see the vulnerability.
I think that allowed them to then show you vulnerability back, which allowed the most healing.
Oh, incredible journey with vulnerability. Each of us has our own journey with learning how to feel safe with being vulnerable. I had one child in particular that in their environment, they were always told how to feel and what to think. And whenever they would try to express themselves, they were told, nope, you need to do it this way or a different way. And so there wasn't the opportunity to really understand their spectrum of experiences or emotions because they never got to experience them. They were literally told they had to experience them a different way. And so it took time for each of them to figure out how to do that. And it's scary when you don't know your best or your worst. It can be scary to start that journey because you might see sides of yourself that you don't like, but you might see sides of yourself that you do. But that's the beauty in life, is that when we do get to see our range, then we get to know how to control or to balance that and see what we are capable of. So then we know where we want to focus our efforts and energy.
I was the kid in that situation, so I definitely understand that. And I understand the need to surround yourself with, as Katie mentioned in a past episode, your 5 people that are really good pillars for you so that you can just have that anchor when you need it, like you had yours. Tell me about pushing past fear, because I know there was a lot of fear there. It took a long time for you to finally leave this situation.
I was. And you know what's so interesting is even once I started breaking free, like part of my mind was so attached to that and still afraid that I tried to find ways to construct a way that it could still work and not work at the same time. It was very interesting. Our minds and our egos are very powerful. But fear and I have a very fascinating relationship, and it started very early on. Um, at, I would even say like my earliest memories of fear were kind of at Lake Powell with my brothers, and we would all go cliff jumping, and I would want to cliff jump and be like them, but fear would always talk me out of that. And so every time I hiked up to the spot that we were going to jump from, I would look over and let the fear talk me right back out of it. And then I asked myself each time, like, why aren't you jumping? You're climbing up there because you want to jump. And I learned that fear was always going to be there every time. Even though I wanted to do it, fear was right there. And the louder and more space I gave fear to be loud, the more it would win. So it was very interesting to learn that fear was going to be there and it needed to accompany me. But it was courage that could take place. One of my favorite quotes is, "You can't have courage without fear." And that takes fear for me and shrinks it into a needed piece to be able to be brave and to be able to step up and have courage. Another one of my favorite quotes around fear is that we need to make fear work for us, that fear can serve us, which again goes hand in hand with that courage piece. That I can take that and say, yep, that's there, but this is something I'm going to do anyway. Here we go. And fear can come along. And so I think, honestly, the believing in myself piece was the crucial part of getting over that, the realizing how capable I was, and that no matter what ended up happening, that there was, like, even if the worst case scenario, right, death, even if somehow I was going to die in this situation, and granted, whether it was from the harm of somebody else or whether it was from not surviving and not having my needs met, right, that's the worst case scenario. And realizing, no, there were a few options and I can build up from there. That fear might be there, but we will find ways to survive, and I can have courage regardless. The fear can come along.
There was one a week when I was doing the coaching program and learning about it, where we learned about how with fear, there can sometimes be different sides and that each side needs a chance to speak. And then they can, once each side is heard, and we have these in our heads, and it can feel like we have different personalities going on. For me, it was surrounding money. So I needed to have the one who wants to spend and then the one who wants to save both have a say. But once they had a say, then they could merge and they both felt heard. Then I was able to move forward. And it sounds like that was very much what needed to happen for you with, do I stay or do I go? And then with fear, jumping off the cliff, knowing that both parts are going to be there. And as long as both parts are heard and you're not trying to suppress one side or the other, it's kind of thinking about the 80s and 90s cartoons with the little angels and devils on the shoulder. As long as both sides are heard and then you can choose, it's a lot easier. And did you notice how in the cartoon, one side or the other that wasn't chosen, they were both heard, but wasn't chosen disappears? Sometimes that happens. They can kind of be minimized and then you can move forward. I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Having our emotions have a voice, giving them space for the voice without judgment. I mean, I love the cartoon, The Angel and Devil, but even if you take away like one's good, one's bad kind of a thing, and just let them be present, give them space. I think there's so much beauty and truth in that. And I've been reading a book called Letting Go by Dr. David Hawkins. And that's some of the very basic parts of learning how to heal is letting ourselves feel without judgment and understanding where that's coming from and why, and give it a voice. And like you said, when we do, you can kind of, it puts it out in front of us. We can kind of more clearly see. And so when I did start constructing a way to maybe stay and still have what I thought that I wanted, I painted that picture what that looked like. And ultimately, I was like, no, that's not what I want a marriage to look like. That's not what I want a life to look like. And that's not what I want for my kids to have their life look like. And when I did give it that voice, I was able to see, no, that isn't what I want and accept it. So that absolutely is very relevant.
And there's a whole part about coaching, we talk about this a lot, where you need to see what is the worst case scenario. And when you see, okay, sometimes it's not going to be that bad, or sometimes, okay, and I see how I can overcome it, that gives you that little parts of trust. And then like release the emotions around it. Definitely release that. I learned that the hard way. I was holding on to the emotions as if they did happen when they did not. But you learn the parts of, oh, I see where I'm capable in these areas, and then you can move forward. And you had guilt over, I painted the picture of if I did stay, even though I know all these horrible things. That's what allowed you to, okay, no, this picture needs to go. Now, how am I going to leave? And how am I going to leave safely and leave with the children? And this is now our family unit. So I really like that you painted that.
That's awesome. That brings in the fear piece again of, I mean, it had to, like, what I was in, the situation I was in was unknown. right? And then removing that brought an unknown. And the unknowns are unsafe, right? They don't feel safe because we don't know them and we want security. We love certainty. Our egos love certainty. And I think that's a huge part where the fear comes in is realizing, and something I've just been learning so much about in the last like 6 months, even, is creating space, like creating that empty. I had to get rid of what what was known and create empty and sit with empty. That means I was alone. That means I had nothing. That means I was desperate and in a desperate mode. And that is scary. But without that empty space, I couldn't find something beautiful and new to fill it while I hung on to the old. And so I think the fear of the uncertainty is something that can keep us in those situations. But creating that blank, creating that empty, as uncertain as it feels, allows for growth, allows for new.
Attention stay-at-home moms, are you ready to take steps towards your dream job, whether it's within a company or building your own business, but feel unsure of where to start? If you're a mom who wants to return to the workforce or start your own business and land your dream job, I have incredible news for you. Introducing my 8-week program designed specifically for moms like you. I understand that the job search or business building process can feel overwhelming, especially after being away from the workforce for several years. That's why I'm here to provide you with practical tools, strategies, and mindset coaching that will empower you to navigate this journey with confidence, whether you choose to pursue a job or start your own business. In my pilot program, we're already underway, but you can still be among the first to know when the doors open to the public. Simply sign up online at wellnessinEverySeason.com to stay updated on all the details. Don't let fear or uncertainty hold you back from pursuing your dream job or business. Together, we'll make your dream job or business a reality. Let's take a look at how the weeks are broken down in my course. Week 1 is Introduction and Journal Entries. We'll dive into understanding your motivations, helping you identify your why, and set the foundation for your journey, whether it's finding a job or building a business. Week 2 is Skill Exploration. We'll explore your existing skills and discover how they align with your dream job or business. This process will help you highlight your strengths and identify areas for improvement. Week 3, Resume Workshop Part 1. If you're pursuing a job, we'll work on creating a compelling resume and cover letter that effectively showcases your experience and skills. If you're building a business, we'll focus on business readiness assessment, business basics to get started, finding a business mentor, understanding business accounting, and creating a business checklist, as well as exploring the ideal business location. Week 4 is Career Exploration and Business Niche Exploration. Together, we'll explore various job offerings and introduce an Excel workbook that will assist you in organizing your job search. If you're building a business, we'll dive into finding your niche, identify unmet customer needs, customer retention strategies, marketing techniques, time management, defining your business brand, creating marketing materials, and establishing a business website. Lots going on that week. Week 5 is Resume Workshop Part 2. You'll present your resume and cover letter to the group for peer review and feedback. This collaborative approach will provide valuable insights to enhance your application materials, or if you're building a business, you'll receive feedback on your business plan and marketing materials. Week 6, Job Hunting and Practice Interviews. If you're pursuing a job, we'll focus on applying for jobs and conducting mock interviews to prepare you for the real thing. If you're building a business, we'll explore client hunting strategies, setting up your website, utilizing social media for business growth, establishing your office, determining fees and package structures, and optimizing social media platforms. Week 7 is When a Job Offer Comes, or business negotiations. If you're pursuing a job, we'll cover topics such as salary negotiation, accepting or declining a job offer, and continuing your job search. If you're building a business, we'll discuss business negotiation techniques with clients, crafting a compelling me in 30 seconds pitch as a business owner, and refining your fees, packages, and business structure. Week 8, Closing out the class. We'll wrap up the program celebrating your progress and accomplishments. You'll gain a sense of closure and leave with the confidence and skills needed to embark on your dream job, journey, or business venture. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity. Sign up now at wellnessinEverySeason.com to be the first to know when our doors open to the public. Whether you're aiming to secure your dream job or build your own business, let's make it a reality together. It also made me think about what I started off this podcast with, the 8 dimensions of wellness. Like, you had your social, you were making sure that you had different pieces put in, and you started working on your emotional. You had your occupational, switched to a job that you liked even better. I'm sure you had to figure out some of your financial to be leaving. even though you were the breadwinner in that situation. And you were changing your environment. There are so many pieces of this that you were changing. From talking to you in past, you were definitely getting your spiritual put in. You were making sure that you had all these pieces that were healthy so that you could then lean into this fear and move forward beyond it. Tell me about the survival mechanisms, how they served you.
Oh man, this question could go on forever. This answer. There's so many as human beings. Fear and the need to survive and safety drives us so much, and whatever feels like is the closest, easiest thing to do to get there. And survival can come in so many ways. There was survival of all of those items that you just listed, like spiritual survival, emotional survival, physical. I mean, physical safety, and so learning to try to pacify somebody else, or if somebody's angry, learning how to what's the right word? Learning how to shrink and try and escape a situation or diffuse a situation or point the cannon if the cannon was pointed at one of the kids, learning to, okay, their survival now is kicking in, so I'm going to step in front of that cannon because I would rather it be pointed at me than at them.
Tell me what survival mechanisms you use to help you get through all of this as you were living in that situation and then deciding to leave. I know that wasn't an overnight decision to leave, that you still needed to prepare so that you could make sure you could leave safely. This is what made me think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have your basic needs met, and now you're really looking for the higher thinking of safety now. You're realizing how unsafe you guys are. Tell me what you did to dig yourself out of this. So if other moms out here are listening and they know of somebody, how can they help them? And then if they themselves are in this situation, give them some advice for how to get out.
Well, each situation is going to be so unique and different, but I love the key points that we've hit on already with believing in yourself, trusting in yourself, building that up. That was one of the biggest foundations in being able to change my situation. And I think realizing that it was a choice. Because sometimes we can go into victim mentality and surrender. We surrender our wanting to choose. Like, this situation is too hard for me. Like, I don't know anything else or how to. So I let the situation choose for me. Or we realize that we're choosing to stay. Like, there was a moment where I was like, no, I want to stay. I want to try and make this better. And that didn't end up working in my favor, or I ended up in that process being able to see more that I actually chose not to stay. And reclaiming my ability to choose helped me not be a victim. And I think that is one of my favorite things to touch on, is that we all do have choice. Sometimes we surrender it in fear of safety, but learning to take that back and reclaim that power of choice and realizing if I'm choosing to be here, I'm choosing to be here. And that may be for my own reasons. I did have reasons that I wanted to stay in a hard situation. I had a lot of good reasons and they were sound, but there did come a point where I felt like I collected enough knowledge and was able to zoom out enough to see that this wasn't going to take me where I wanted to go in my future, that I was going to be stuck in a giant loop, and that I no longer wanted that because it was creating harm for me. It's creating harm and detriment to my children. So I think one of the coping mechanisms is to resign and, again, kind of give up our power, give up power to the situation. It just owns us. I'm now a slave to this environment. Man, as I say those words, they hit really powerful. I really was a slave to my environment, and then trying to maintain that. There's also positive coping mechanisms. I knew that happiness is a choice and is a journey, not a destination. I chose to focus on a lot of things that did make me happy. Like, the sun did rise. I found good in any circumstance, even the ones that were were scary and hard. And I would find a way to overcome them, whether that was spirituality and know that I could pray and turn to Jesus Christ and he would be there and I could find positive and gratitude out of that, or I could step outside and put my bare feet in the grass and be grateful for nature and find happiness there. I think that was a positive coping mechanism for me. What are some of the survival mechanisms you've seen in life or that you've used?
Well, you talked about grounding, whether you realize it or not. You're stepping outside and grounding yourself. For me, disassociation, where I was floating above the situation, floating outside of myself. And for me, I had to learn how not to do that anymore once I was out of the situation. I can tell you a little bit about what that is, but I'll explain it more in episode in like a month. But it is a great way to cope. You're turning off parts of your brain, so you're not there experiencing everything at once. That is when you can see a therapist later and have them hold your hand through some of it, which I'm experiencing right now. Another survival mechanism I had was losing myself, becoming more of a robot, trying to find exactly what they wanted and to be that and to think ahead. And I'm really good at reading people, reading people's emotions. There are certain people that I can't read, and if I can't read them, I stay away from them because I don't feel safe. It's still very ingrained in me. But because of that, I am able to relate to people faster, especially if they have trauma, and help them see things differently. And that's the whole reason why I ended up becoming a life coach is I love helping people. It also taught me empathy, and I'm relearning how to be as open with it as my husband is.
I really do think dissociation comes from not being able to admit what we need or not being, or like, I think that's one of the hugest steps with dissociation is realizing, okay, what is not being met that I need to verbalize. And we may be in a moment where we can't verbalize that, because we need safety to be able to be vulnerable. We're not going to be vulnerable as we're running away from a tiger that's chasing us. We're in survival mode, right? So it does take a moment of security and safety to be able to open up. But even if we're just able to be vulnerable with ourselves with the dissociation and say, what am I missing? What is making me uncomfortable? Why am I checking out? What am I not getting that I need? And even if we just end up putting a pin in it, so when we are in a safe environment later, we can work on giving that to ourselves. I think it's a really huge and great practice, great exercise to do to ask ourselves those questions.
What I'm realizing a lot with your bravery is you're realizing that you wanted to be an example for your children, that this is not what you want to get into all over again and continue this cycle and have it go through the generations by finding a spouse just like you were married to before. I think that is super important as moms is to remember the example that we are setting for our children, who we choose to stay with, how we show up in relationship.
And I remember like journaling about this. I wanted to be an example of a good wife. I wanted to be example of somebody who can hang in there and not quit. I was not a quitter, and that is something my children were going to know. And realizing what examples I was setting that I didn't realize I was setting. And I think that was one of the hard truths that kind of slapped myself in the face. That as I thought I was being a great example of somebody who can be strong. Like all marriages aren't perfect. All marriages are going to have difficulties. And so I wanted to be able to teach my kids that amount of resilience. What I didn't realize myself was how bad my own situation was. And so something that side effect ended up being an example is most of them now kind of are terrified of marriage because they don't want to be trapped in a terrible relationship and not be able to leave. So they feel safer with just a relationship that they can end instead of a marriage that would take a divorce because it would be easier to exit subconsciously. Again, interesting some of the examples I didn't realize I was teaching, then to be able to switch that mindset and have the example be that I want to set is how to live a healthier life and kind of target more higher principles that I want to be an example of.
So, boundary setting for sure. You wanted to talk about allowing transition moments and merging color stories. You told me a little bit about this before, but I'm excited to learn more about this. Can you tell us about this?
Yes, I'm excited about that. I love this analogy, and it really helped me have a little more patience with transitioning. So, allowing transition moments in our lives, I think, is really key when we are in one aspect or an area or environment of our lives and we've decided we want to change and we want to get to a new one. It takes walking a path of transition. So, for example, I like using colors. So, let's say my environment is colored red and I'm in a red environment and I want to get to blue. Well, as I leave red, and there's a lot of other things that can go with it, like grief, we have to process. Even if we want to leave it, we're leaving something behind. And sometimes you have to have a moment of grief and allow that to pass through us. Again, even if it's something we want to leave, sometimes we feel a grief for what we were attached to it. And It's okay to allow that grief and admit maybe there were little pieces in that red environment that were serving me, but I have chosen to leave it. And so I'm walking towards blue. Well, leaving red is going to feel very uncomfortable. That's what we were used to. That's what is a known. And again, we're moving towards a little bit more of an unknown. And so as soon as I leave it, again, there's this unfamiliarity territory, but that doesn't mean I'm showing up right into blue. Sometimes there's a transition. And so in the middle, there's going to be this like purpley color. I'm going from red to blue, and I have to transition through a space that's going to be not red and going to not be blue, and allowing ourselves patience through that, through realizing we're in this unknown world. It's purple. It's not necessarily where I want to be. There's new things. I need to be able to continue walking to get to the new blue where I want to be. And sometimes I think allowing those moments instead of feeling failure like, oh, when is blue ever going to get here, or look, I'm not at blue, so I need to go back to red. Red's more known, it's easier to just turn around. So realizing that just to hang in there, there are transition moments. Things don't just transform overnight. And so there may be a period in that in transitioning to a higher version of yourself, that you may have a moment of looking back and reverting, but to remember that you're transitioning and that's okay. It's going to look different until you get to blue and be able to build your new home in blue. So just allowing for a transition moment and recognizing it for what it is.
I struggled with that until, I don't know, more recent than I like to admit. It was a few years ago, of just finding the joy in the journey, like you were talking about, but in the transitions. Because there's so many times where I'll be happy when. Once you get to that when, then it's the next when that you'll be happy. And it's like, well, why can't I be happy while I'm going to the when? Because there's always going to be, and this is what I really liked talking about with Maslow's hierarchy. As we get to each rung, then it's like, okay, well, I'm ready for my next need to be met. So I really like what you were talking about allowing that transition and finding peace, finding ways to have peace in that and having joy. There was one thing that you talked about when we were talking, that I'd love for you to mention, where you can have different triggers and they can even be visual cues. And you were talking about wallpaper. Can you explain that just briefly? Because I know we're short on time, but I think it will be helpful for other people, not just how it was for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we can do another segment on that later too if you want, because that's I'm really passionate about that. The What you're referring to is a conversation that we had about learning where we're not free. And I am very passionate about realizing how my trauma has limited me in certain areas of my life. And there's an example I gave that if you were a child and you were abused growing up, and let's say you were always abused in the same room and this room had pink wallpaper, you may not even realize it, but when you like step into another room with pink wallpaper later into your life, you might go through a lot of those physiological effects, the fast breathing, the anxiety feeling, the nervousness, and maybe not even realize that you're connecting it with that pink wallpaper, but your body, your subconscious is noticing it. And those moments or triggers in life, whether it's wallpaper or a person or an environment or a city or the things around us, can be a sign that this is somewhere where I'm not free in life. Something else determined how I interact with this through a process of healing. And it takes, again, it takes being in an environment of safety to be able to work through some of these things. But for me, my goal is to get to a space, or what does Camber think of pink wallpaper? Like if I had never interacted it with before, and this is the very first time I'm thinking of it or seeing it and getting to experience it, what would I just naturally think? Would I like it? Would I not? I want to be able to create that experience and be free to know what I would think of it in and of myself without it being tainted by somebody else or some other experience or some other kind of environment. And I tell you right now, I've done that in my life with a couple of the triggers, and it's been incredible. It's been a learning experience to take something that I automatically hated and to be able to wipe this clean slate and to heal and to detach meaning from that item and realize that that meaning belongs somewhere else. It doesn't belong to that item or that person or environment or whatever it is, that color. And then be able to interact with it freely for the first time was a really special experience. And I surprised myself. I learned a little bit more about myself.
So, what made you change your work life and environment to make space for your life callings? And then tell us about what your life callings are and what you're doing.
On our honeymoon, my husband was talking about possibilities in life. And I literally looked at him and I said, "What makes you so special that you get to believe anything is possible in life? Like, how do you get to be afforded that belief?" I was still a little jaded, and dreaming was still really difficult for me. I'd been through a lot of hard things. I had accepted that life wasn't going to be ever what I wanted it to be. And to see him live this belief so freely for himself took me back. I was like, what makes you so special? And so it brought a conversation in, and I really started seeing some of the limiting beliefs that I had around this concept and started changing them, which was huge. And there was a big letting go of an ego moment, because if I now all of a sudden at 40 years old in my 40s realize that this is possible, why couldn't I have realized this 20 years ago? And my ego doesn't want to admit that, right? Because that means that I wasn't good enough to see it back then. But the ego will do all sorts of things. And once I push the ego aside, allowing space, like, no, I wasn't out of space. And in my life 20 years ago to have these kind of thoughts, I was in the middle of surviving. And allowing myself grace can get rid of the ego. But once I did that, then I started opening up a lot of different thought processes and pathways of thinking and of dreaming. And it took identifying maybe what some dreams are, which again was really, but that saying that one sentence, there's so much behind that. It was very difficult for me to allow myself to identify some dreams. But then once I did that, learning that there may be ways, like it's kind of working backwards. Like, okay, I have this one target and goal. What would it take to get there? And working backwards to get where I am now. I have a very giving heart. I have a huge capacity to love. And my biggest desire is just to shine. I just want to bring light to the world and to other people's lives. I actually really am excited about creating an app next year that will bring some light and positivity and some questions to people daily's lives to get them thinking more outside themselves. And that's kind of how it transformed into a business where I wanted to be a content creator.
And what is this platform if we want to follow you?
Oh, well, I'm on TikTok. I am on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. Right now, it's just in the format of shorts and reels at the moment. Exploring perspectives. And so there's a website, www.exploringperspectives.com. I think on Instagram, it's Exploring Perspectives Together. But on TikTok, it's Exploring Perspectives. On Facebook, it's Exploring Perspectives as well. And you can find links to all of the platforms on the website on exploringperspectives.com.
Perfect. Are there any last thoughts as we close out?
This has just been fun. I really enjoy talking and conversing. I love learning from others and gaining perspectives from others as well. And I think that just creates more light. So thank you.
Thank you for being on here. Here are some coaching questions to help you ponder where you are and what you need to change throughout this week. How have you learned to trust yourself and your own life? What experiences or influence have played a significant role in developing that trust? Reflecting on moments when you pushed past fear, what did you discover about yourself? How did those experiences shape your perception of courage and fear? In what ways have survival mechanisms served you throughout your life? Are there any specific instances where you have noticed their impact and the lesson they brought? When do you find it challenging to stay present in the moment? How can you cultivate greater awareness and remain connected to your thoughts, emotions, and surroundings? Have there been significant transition moments in your life? How did you navigate them? What lessons did you learn from those experiences? Reflecting on your current work and life environment, do you feel it aligns with your life callings? If not, what changes can you make to create more space in your true passions and purpose? What specific challenges do you face as a mother? How can you leverage your experiences and wisdom to motivate and inspire other moms or parents? How can you show up more authentically in your own life? What steps can you take to align your actions, beliefs, and values in a way that truly represents who you are? In this podcast episode of Wellness in Every Season, we explored Camber Sloan's journey as a trauma survivor with a passion for truth. We discussed key points such as learning to trust oneself, overcoming fear, understanding survival mechanisms like disassociation, embracing transition moments, and Camber's inspiring business venture. Join us next time for a discussion on living authentically. Thank you for joining us on this week's refreshing wellness discussion. I am Autumn Carter, your guide through the seasons of motherhood, and I hope you found inspiration and valuable insights during our time together. If you resonated with the topics we explored today and want to continue your wellness journey, I invite you to follow me on Instagram at Mom's Wellness in Every Season. There you'll discover a wealth of ongoing wellness tips specifically curated for moms like you. Sharing our podcast with others is an act of caring, and I invite you to spread the word by sharing, subscribing, and leaving a review wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Your support is deeply valuable to us and enables us to reach more mothers who are seeking transformation and empowerment. If you have a specific topic you'd like us to cover in more detail, or if you're interested in a free coaching consultation, don't hesitate to reach out. You can send me a direct message on Instagram or visit my website, wellnessinEverySeason.com, to send an email. I'm here to support you on your wellness journey. Thank you again for being part of our vibrant community. I am genuinely excited to connect with you, hear your stories, and continue this important discussion in the weeks to come. Until next time, remember to prioritize your well-being, embrace every season with grace, and always strive for wellness in every aspect of your motherhood journey. Take care, and I can't wait to catch up with you soon.